"You don't belong in first class," the flight attendant snapped, ripping his boarding pass in half without even blinking. She didn't know it yet, but in exactly 30 minutes, $3.1 billion in airline loyalty programs would go dark. 6 major carriers would lose access to their VIP systems, and her name would be flagged in a federal compliance review. And the man she just humiliated? He built the system they all depended on. Tell us where you're watching from, and be honest. What would you have done if someone tore up your ticket and told you your face didn't belong in first class? 30 minutes earlier, the terminal at Toronto Pearson International was quiet. Gate D14, an early Monday flight to Denver. Mostly business travelers. The kind of flight where everything moves in a rhythm. Loyalty tiers, pre-boarding zones, people in suits pretending not to be tired. And walking into it all, dressed in jeans, black sneakers, and a plain t-shirt, was Jalen Price. No Rolex, no entourage, no signal to the world that he was a multimillionaire or the CEO of anything. That was intentional. He wasn't here to be recognized. He was here to test the system he created, because something was broken, and he'd seen the data to prove it. Over the last 8 months, his company, MilesTrust, the loyalty infrastructure powering upgrades for over 34 million flyers, had flagged over 120 incidents where elite passengers were mysteriously reassigned, denied upgrades, or asked to move to economy. Not because of points, not because of policy, because of how they looked. Too casual, too ethnic, too unfamiliar to fit someone's internal picture of first class. And those were just the ones who reported it. So this time, Jalen didn't send an investigator. He came himself. Alone. Underdressed. Invisible. Exactly how the system seemed to treat people like him. He checked in normally. No fast track, no alerts, no, "Do you know who I am?" Attitude. Just a man with a ticket. Seat 1A. Paid in full. The gate agent scanned it. It turned green. "Enjoy your flight, Mr. Price," she said, not recognizing the name. He didn't expect her to. He walked the jet bridge like any other traveler, past a white couple in designer athleisure who looked at his outfit. Then each other. One of them murmured, "That can't be first class." Jalen let it go. But at the aircraft door, he met her. Sandra Lowell, senior flight attendant. Sharp bun, sharper eyes. She looked him up and down once. "Sir, I think you're in the wrong line," she said, arms crossed. "No," Jalen replied calmly, holding out his ticket. "I'm 1A. She snatched it, didn't even read it, just tore it in half. "I don't care what that says. This seat's been reassigned. You need to move to economy." Behind her, Lena, a check-in agent who'd followed him down, chimed in, "We've had a lot of fake printed home tickets lately. Probably just a glitch." Jalen said nothing, but the word glitch stung, because he built the system that issued those tickets, and he knew. It had been working perfectly until people started interfering with it. 10 rows back, someone noticed. Sophie Nguyen, 24, marketing strategist from Boulder, had been watching the whole thing. She'd followed MilesTrust since grad school. She knew Jalen Price by face. And what she was seeing right now? This wasn't just a mix-up. It was bias, live and unfiltered. She pulled out her phone and hit record. "I have ID," Jalen offered, still calm. Sandra rolled her eyes. "People fake IDs too. You don't just walk into first class with a t-shirt and sneakers." "I have status." "That's cute," she sneered. "So does everyone on this flight." That was her second mistake. Jalen didn't just have status. He was the reason status existed. But he wasn't here to flex that. Not yet. "Is there a problem here?" a voice asked. Captain Rourke walked over, late 50s, silver hair, textbook posture. Sandra launched into her explanation like it was rehearsed. Suspicious boarding pass, fake ID, troublemaker in first class. Jalen handed over both his ID and his Infinity Black MilesTrust card, only ever issued to system-level operators and airline CEOs. Rourke gave them a glance and handed them back without a word. "Sir," he said, "we're asking you to step aside before this becomes a bigger issue." From row 5, another passenger whispered, "He's not raising his voice. He's being calm." Her seatmate replied, "And they're treating him like a criminal." Sophie hit upload. The clip hit 12,000 views in 6 minutes. In the galley, Sandra muttered to Lena, "I've had enough of these scam upgrades. They dress down and expect champagne service. He probably bought that card off eBay." Lena laughed. "Not in those jeans, honey." What neither of them noticed was that Sophie had already recorded the audio through the aisle curtain. Jalen stood still, unbothered, silent, because while they were mocking him, laughing about his clothes, questioning his presence, he was already logging into Ethos Core, the back-end compliance platform that managed every airline's loyalty behavior index. And then he said just 5 words into his AirPods. "Rachel, prepare the lockdown protocol." Across the cabin, a man opened Twitter and saw Sophie's video climbing past 30K views. "Wait," he whispered to his wife. "I think that's the CEO guy, the loyalty guy." She looked again. "Oh God, it is." Another woman stood and said aloud, "I saw his pass scan green. This is wrong." But the crew didn't back off, not until it was too late. Jalen didn't shout, didn't argue. He simply watched. And 30 minutes after Sandra tore up his boarding pass, the first alert hit Altus Air's internal system. Low CI, red flag triggered compliance, access suspended, all MilesTrust-based upgrades on hold, estimated impact. 6 carriers, 3.1B in active loyalty valuation. Sandra hadn't just insulted a passenger. She had just provoked the man who ran the backbone of the North American loyalty ecosystem. And by the time Flight 610 reached cruising altitude, her career and the airline's credibility would be grounded. By the time Jalen sat down, not in seat 1A, but in 17C, between a coughing hedge fund guy and a middle school teacher with too much perfume, Sophie Nguyen's video had crossed 45,000 views, and Sandra still had no idea who he was. Neither did Captain Rourke, neither did Lena. But the system knew. And it had already started responding. Back at MilesTrust HQ in Chicago, a woman named Rachel Young stepped away from her desk and tapped twice on a biometric pad. The screen in front of her shimmered, revealing the Ethos Core terminal. Her clearance was second only to Jalen's. She'd been on standby since he texted boarding. That was all she needed. Now it was real. He'd said the words, "Prepare the lockdown protocol." She slid her headset on. Her voice was calm, deliberate. "Initiating system integrity lockdown. Level 1 authorization." 3 other screens came alive across the ops floor. "LCI sync points, pending override," said her assistant Kyle, scanning his terminal. "Visa and Air Alliance systems pinging red flags. ETA for full sync, 90 seconds. Routing notifications to onboard compliance bots now," another voice said. Rachel exhaled. "Start logging impact," she said. And just like that, the invisible storm began. Back on the plane, Sandra passed by Jalen without even glancing his way. She was too busy smoothing her skirt and whispering to Lena about how these people always try to game the system. "They think the airline owes them just because they flash a card and act calm," Lena said. Sandra scoffed. "You saw his face when I tore it, right? Like he expected me to apologize." They laughed. And 2 rows behind the galley curtain, Sophie heard it all. Again. Her hand trembled slightly as she tapped the record button on her voice memo app. She didn't know Jalen personally, but she knew enough. Knew that this wasn't just a moment. It was systemic. And that meant somebody had to document it. Captain Rourke stood near the flight deck, sipping bad coffee, muttering under his breath. "This is what happens when gate staff get lazy with checks," he told First Officer Stein. "Let one fake pass slide and suddenly we've got TikTok lawyers filming every seat change." Stein didn't answer. He was watching the passengers. "There's something off about him," the captain added. Stein turned. "The guy in 17C?" Rourke nodded. "Yeah, way too calm. Didn't argue, didn't push. That's not normal. Stein raised an eyebrow. Maybe it's not him you should be worried about. Rourke frowned. Then his tablet buzzed. LCI internal flag. Status: active review flight 617 under observation MilesTrust tier integrity. Under investigation. Rourke stared at the screen. He hadn't seen that alert. Ever. Down in 17C, Jalen scrolled through Sophie's video. He didn't share it. He didn't comment. He just watched. Twice. The clip was tight. No filters. No voiceover. Just Sandra, ripping a ticket and saying, "You don't belong here." He closed his eyes and inhaled once, slow and steady. 20 years ago, he'd heard almost the same sentence at a job interview. "You don't quite have the look we're after." Back then, it shattered him. Now, it activated something deeper. At 7:51 a.m. Est, the first automated shutdown pinged the Altus Air Loyalty database. Their internal upgrade dashboard froze. MilesTrust API disconnected. Lounge entry passcodes invalidated. The system was locked. By 7:52, 3 partner carriers reported temporary redemption issues. By 7:54, Visa Air Alliance suspended points-linked travel card transactions. Customers were calling. And Rachel? She was already 2 steps ahead. "Routing notification to FAA ethics oversight," she said. Kyle stared. "You're looping in the government?" Rachel didn't blink. Protocol 7. If a carrier gets flagged red on LCI during a live flight, we notify oversight. "Has that ever happened?" "No," she said. "Not until today." Back on the plane, Sophie watched as passengers started to whisper. A woman across the aisle looked at her Altus app and frowned. "My upgrade just disappeared," she said to her husband. "Did yours?" He checked. "It says pending. That's weird." The man behind them groaned. "My lounge access just kicked me out mid-check-in." Sophie felt her stomach tighten. This wasn't just a video anymore. It was ripple effects. Real ones. And Jalen? Still silent. Still watching. Sandra approached him again, this time faking concern. "Sir, if you're uncomfortable, we can offer you a complimentary beverage back here." Jalen looked up. "No need. I'm fine." She forced a smile. "I just don't want you to feel mistreated." "You don't have to want it," he replied evenly. "You already did it." Her smile faded, and Jalen turned back to his screen. At 7:58 a.m., the FAA Compliance Integrity Division received a priority notice from MilesTrust with attached video and transcript logs. Title: Suspected Loyalty Bias Violation. Live incident attached. Sophie Nguyen's video. Audio clips from Sandra and Lena. Screenshot of Jalen's Infinity Black Card flagged as invalid. FAA flagged the incident as Level 2 priority. Next step: ethics review across 6 airline partners. Inside the flight deck, Rourke got a second alert. This one didn't mince words. MilesTrust override activated, LCI. Locked your carrier is now red flagged on the Loyalty Compliance Index. All redemption, upgrades, and elite privileges are suspended until further notice. Captain Rourke read it twice, then a third time. Then he looked at his co-pilot. "Do you know who's sitting in 17C?" Stein didn't answer. But Jalen? He knew they'd just realized. Rachel's voice came into his earpiece, softly. "Jalen, Altus just got the full lock. 4 banks froze tier conversions. Visa has flagged redemption streams. FAA confirmed receipt." He nodded slightly. Rachel continued. "Board is on standby. Do you want me to alert media monitoring?" "Not yet," Jalen replied. "Let the system speak first." "Copy." He tapped once more, activating silent trace mode on all 6 partner airlines. Within 10 minutes, 3 of them would flag his name retroactively, revealing a pattern of manual seat reassignments going back months. Pattern bias. In data. Now that was something no PR team could spin. Sandra leaned over to Lena near the galley. "Something's wrong," she whispered. "You mean besides the fake loyalty pass?" Sandra didn't laugh. She was watching the passengers, watching how phones were up, watching how that man, the one she humiliated, hadn't said a word, but somehow the cabin had shifted. Lena's tablet pinged. Access denied. Loyalty network unavailable. MilesTrust API. Timeout. She looked up slowly. Sandra? What? I think we messed up. At exactly 8:09, Jalen opened a secure terminal app and keyed in a final code. LCI Wave, Sector Notification Protocol. This would push an encrypted version of the complaint and associated files to the top 10 airport ethics teams in the country, starting with Denver, Chicago, and JFK. Sandra's name, Lena's name, Captain Rourke's name. All logged, all traceable, all marked active ethics review, pending federal evaluation. Sophie's phone buzzed. Her video had just crossed 92,000 views. The comments were coming in faster now. This is bigger than a bad upgrade. CEO of what? He's him. Altus Air is done. She turned to look at Jalen, who gave her a barely perceptible nod. She didn't record it. She didn't need to, because by then, the world was already watching. And Jalen Price? He hadn't said much, but he just flipped a switch no one could unflip. Okay, Sandra whispered, her voice barely audible now. What the hell is happening? Lena's eyes were wide. Her tablet wouldn't stop flashing red. Every system she tapped, loyalty upgrades, seat maps, even beverage preferences, returned one message. LCI integrity lock engaged. Access suspended. What's LCI? Lena asked, voice cracking. Sandra didn't answer, because truthfully, she didn't know either. But one row behind the galley, Captain Rourke did, and the color had already drained from his face. He stood in the cockpit doorway, holding his iPad like it might catch fire. The alert wasn't just internal anymore. It was now mirrored across the FAA's active watch list. A red flag. Flight 617. Under LCI Live Audit Trigger Source. MilesTrust Core Executive Operator. Identity. Authorized. J. Price. The captain read it twice. Then again. J. Price. His eyes darted back down the aisle, toward seat 17C. At that exact moment, Jalen was staring out the window. Not thinking, not planning, just remembering. Because it wasn't the first time he'd been told he didn't belong. 22 years ago, first day of grad school, finance and systems engineering. University of Chicago. He showed up to a private fellowship orientation in a button-up shirt and slacks. Clean, pressed, nervous, but ready. He was the only black student in the room. A professor, not unkind, just unaware, asked if he was there to help with setup. He didn't get angry, just nodded and said, "No, sir, I'm one of the scholars." The man blinked again, and then smiled awkwardly. That moment stayed with him for decades, not because it was the worst, but because it was so normal. Jalen looked down at his phone. Another message from Rachel. FAA watch log, now monitoring Flight 617. Ethics Compliance Division pulling incident patterns. We found 3 prior cases with similar flags. All Altus Air, all black male customers. He nodded once, lips pressed. It wasn't just about him anymore. It never had been. Sandra, meanwhile, was unraveling in the galley. "This isn't possible," she muttered. Lena tried refreshing the app again. "What does LCI Wave Sync mean?" No response. Then a chime. Captain Rourke had entered the galley silently, eyes locked on the crew. "You two need to tell me, right now, what happened with passenger 17C. Lena froze. Sandra straightened defensively. "Fake ticket," she said. "He handed me something that didn't scan. I tore it up. He didn't argue, so I assumed." "You assumed," the captain cut in. "Did you check his ID?" "I glanced at it. Did you verify the name against the manifest?" "I mean, not directly." she admitted, faltering. Rourke's voice turned low. That man is Jalen Price. Lena blinked. Who? Sandra stared. The loyalty guy? He's not just the loyalty guy, the captain said. He runs MilesTrust. He owns the backbone of our status system. He's the one who just locked us out of a $3 billion ecosystem. A beat of silence passed. Then Sandra whispered, No way. Rourke pulled up his screen. The alert was there. Official, irrefutable. Triggered by Jalen A. Price position, CEO, MilesTrust status, executive override, active. 3 rows back, a young black father with his toddler daughter shifted in his seat. He leaned toward his wife and murmured, They're panicking up there. His wife whispered, About that man? He nodded. Good, she said, and for once, no one told her to lower her voice. Back in row 17C, Jalen's phone vibrated again. Rachel, Denver, JFK, LAX, and Chicago terminals just received system freeze updates. All 6 airlines now flagged as non-compliant pending ethics audit. Legal teams requesting 72-hour grace period. FAA asking for a live statement. Media's watching. He typed back one word. Wait. Because he wasn't done yet. Sandra returned to the cabin, trying to look composed, but her hands trembled slightly. She approached Jalen. He didn't look at her. Mr. Price, she began, voice overly sweet. I just wanted to say... He raised a hand gently. Don't, he said. She blinked. I just think maybe there was a misunderstanding. There wasn't. Her jaw tightened. I didn't know who you were. Jalen turned his head, locking eyes with her for the first time. That, he said softly, is exactly the problem. Sophie was still recording, now with her phone in her lap. The camera captured everything, the passengers watching quietly, the shifting tone in Sandra's voice, the look on Jalen's face. She wasn't filming for clicks anymore. She was filming for memory, because this would be replayed for years in training videos, news cycles, and classrooms. Captain Rourke came over next, slower this time. Mr. Price, he said, carefully. Yes? I want to personally apologize on behalf of the crew. Jalen nodded. Noted. I wasn't aware of your identity, Rourke added. Jalen almost smiled. If I'd worn a suit and a tag, would that have changed things? The captain didn't answer. He didn't need to, because the silence was the answer. The plane began its descent into Denver. The cabin was unusually still. No announcements, no beverage carts, just watching, waiting, sitting with the weight of what they'd witnessed and what they almost allowed to happen. In her seat, Sophie uploaded one final video, just 20 seconds long. It showed Sandra standing next to Jalen, apologizing. Then Jalen looking out the window, quiet. The caption read, He didn't yell, he didn't threaten, he just flipped a switch, and the whole system listened. Loyalty Gate, Napper Jalen Price. This is why we speak up. 10 minutes later, the clip hit 1.2 million views. Jalen stood when the seatbelt light turned off. He didn't rush. He waited for the aisle to clear, let others go ahead. When he reached the door, Lena stood there, pale. Mr. Price, she mumbled. I didn't mean... He paused. You didn't mean to get caught, he said calmly. She dropped her eyes and walked away. Outside the jet bridge, 2 people were waiting, a MilesTrust security liaison and a representative from Altus Air Corporate. They both looked rattled. The rep stepped forward. Mr. Price, the board is requesting a meeting immediately. We'd like to clarify and... You'll speak with Rachel, Jalen replied, and the Department of Transportation. He walked right past them. No press, no cameras, just quiet. As he exited into the terminal, his phone buzzed once more. Rachel. All 6 CEOs just requested an emergency summit. 3 are offering preemptive resignations. The FAA wants you to help draft the new ethics charter. They're calling it the The loyalty mandate. Jalen stood still for a second. Then he typed back, "Tell them, we don't need a statement. We need a standard." The seatbelt light blinked off, and the cabin filled with the usual rustle. Bags unzipped, headphones clicked, phones turned back on. But no one got up. Not really. They were still watching seat 17C. Jalen hadn't moved. He just sat there, calm, still, unshaken, his phone resting face down on the tray table, hands folded in his lap like he was waiting for a meeting to start. In a way, he was. 3 rows up, Sandra stood frozen near the galley curtain, chewing her thumbnail like it might help her make sense of what was happening. "Okay," she muttered to Lena. "We can still fix this." Lena wasn't so sure. Her Altus-issued tablet was still dead. The MilesTrust interface hadn't come back online. Her login was locked, and the error message hadn't changed in 15 minutes. Access denied. LCI compliance pending. Do not override. "What if he's bluffing?" Lena asked. Sandra scoffed, mostly to convince herself. "He doesn't look like someone who could shut down a network." Look at him. That was mistake number 4, and maybe the most fatal of them all. Up in the cockpit, Captain Rourke stared at his dashboard, a slow horror blooming across his features. "This can't be real," he muttered. But it was. Every time he refreshed the live ops terminal, the same message appeared. LCI lock active. And now, a blinking red bar beneath it. Incident pattern matches 3 prior flagged events. Confirm escalation. 3 prior events. All black men. All first class. All quietly removed or reassigned mid-boarding. Jalen wasn't the first, but he might be the last. In seat 17C, Jalen finally turned his phone face up. A new message from Rachel blinked on screen. "FAA has initiated preliminary review. DOT is requesting a live statement. Visa Air Alliance will freeze loyalty-linked credit lines in 18 minutes unless compliance is restored. Legal advises no response yet. Do you want to proceed?" He tapped back a single word. "Yes." 2 seats over, the hedge fund guy who'd ignored him all flight finally broke the silence. "You, work in tech or something?" Jalen turned his head slowly. "Something like that." The man gave an awkward laugh. "Whatever you did, the crew looks like they've seen a ghost." Jalen said nothing, just gave a tight, polite nod. The kind you give someone who didn't stand up when you were being dragged down. At the front of the cabin, Sophie Nguyen stood up. Not loud, not angry, just steady. "I think everyone here should know what's happening," she said. Passengers turned. Sophie raised her phone. "This man," she continued, "was told he didn't belong in first class. His ticket was torn, his ID ignored, and now the airline's loyalty system is collapsing in real time." Several heads swiveled toward Jalen. A few people pulled out their phones again. Sandra stormed down the aisle. "Ma'am, please sit down. This is a private matter." "No," Sophie replied, voice calm but sharp. "It became public the second you decided to treat someone like they were invisible." Sandra's cheeks flushed. "You don't know the full story." "I don't need to. I recorded enough of it." From across the aisle, a businessman in a navy blazer stood up. He didn't say anything, just stood. Then a woman behind him. Then 2 more. A quiet wall of presence. No signs, no shouting, just stillness. Witnesses. And nothing terrifies a guilty system more than a calm crowd watching closely. Sandra backed up 2 steps, then turned toward Jalen. "We didn't know who you were." He looked at her for the first time since she'd torn his boarding pass. "That," he said, "is the most honest thing you've said all morning." In the cockpit, Captain Rourke's hands trembled slightly as he lifted the radio. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said over the intercom, "due to unforeseen technical issues, we are experiencing a temporary disruption with our loyalty system. We ask for your patience." Sophie rolled her eyes. Jalen didn't even blink. At 8:17 a.m., Rachel activated the Loyalty Ethics Data Sync Protocol from Chicago. That meant All 6 MilesTrust integrated airlines were now on ethics hold. 18 partner banks received compliance reports. Over 2.4 million passengers saw error messages in their apps. And every major news outlet from CNN to Bloomberg received a press tip with the subject line, "What happens when the man you humiliate built your entire loyalty system?" Back on the plane, Lena sat slumped in the galley, head in her hands. "What do we do?" she whispered. Sandra didn't answer. She couldn't, because for the first time in her long senior crew career, she wasn't in control. At 8:21 a.m., Sophie's first video hit 2.8 million views. The comments were savage. "Altus Air about to be Altus ain't." That man's eyes said, "Try me," without saying a word. "I hope Sandra updates her resume." And one comment pinned to the top, "He's not a threat, he's a mirror. And now the industry has to look at itself." Jalen stood slowly. Passengers stepped aside without needing to be asked. He didn't walk toward the crew. He walked toward the galley wall, pressed a button on his phone. Rachel's voice came through his earpiece, crisp and clean. "FAA wants your final statement before they escalate to federal compliance status." Jalen responded, still in a low voice, "Send the file." A half-second later, across multiple terminals, a new document pinged live. The Loyalty Ethics Mandate. Authored by Jalen Price. Status: live draft for industry adoption required sign-off. All carriers within MilesTrust network. Non-compliance result: immediate loss of upgrade privileges, partner redemption, and federal compliance flagging. Back in the cabin, Sophie whispered to the man beside her, "You're watching history." He nodded slowly. "Yeah, and the best part?" She glanced over. He never had to raise his voice. At 8:30 a.m. sharp, the final update rolled across the screen in Captain Rourke's cockpit. Ethos protocol activated. LCI lock complete. DOT acknowledged. FAA acknowledge. Altus Air flagged. Non-compliant. Industry-wide notice pending. Rourke leaned back in his seat and muttered, "Well, we just made aviation history." His co-pilot replied, "Not we, Captain." In seat 17C, Jalen closed his phone, leaned back, and exhaled slowly. Not in exhaustion, not in relief, but in quiet satisfaction. Because this wasn't revenge, it was reform. And it had just taken flight. The terminal at Denver International was buzzing with its usual Monday morning chaos. But Gate C-17? Frozen. The Altus Air crew stood stiff, lips pursed, eyes darting at every screen that flashed red. Passengers were murmuring. Phones were vibrating. The airport's central display board, normally streaming flight updates and gate changes, had begun flashing an unusual message. LCI compliance hold. Loyalty system suspended. Please check with airline representative. The gate agents had no answers. The whispers started quickly. "Is the system down? Why can't I access my lounge pass? What's going on with Altus?" And somewhere among them stood a man in a black sweater, luggage in hand, unnoticed by most, but being tracked by everyone who mattered. Jalen Price stepped off the jet bridge and into the chaos. He didn't walk fast. He didn't need to. He just moved with the calm certainty of someone who knew exactly what domino was falling next. And right on cue, his phone buzzed again. "Rachel, it's done. Visa Air Alliance just froze 1.07 B in pending redemptions. 3 loyalty credit partners issued temporary suspensions. FAA Ethics Board has formally opened compliance review on Altus and 2 linked carriers. Press is calling it the silent shutdown. You want to comment?" Jalen typed back 2 words. "Not yet." 2 stories above, in a glass-walled executive lounge overlooking the tarmac, a man in a sharp gray suit nearly spilled his espresso. Mitchell Sloan, Senior VP of Operations at Altus Air. He had just opened the real-time operations dashboard and watched as the entire East Coast loyalty pipeline went dark. "This can't be right," he whispered, pulling his phone. The direct call went out immediately. "Get me Rourke, now!" Inside the crew debriefing room, Captain Rourke was already waiting. He'd landed the plane, handed off the cockpit report, and said nothing. Now his phone rang. He answered with a flat, "Yes, sir." Sloane's voice came in hot. "What the hell is going on? Why am I seeing LCI flags? Why is our entire loyalty network under audit?" Rourke didn't blink. "Because we kicked Jalen Price out of first class, sir." Silence. "What?" "You heard me. We denied boarding, tore up his ticket, and reseated him in economy. You're telling me," Sloane was pacing now, "you let the founder of the loyalty infrastructure sit in 17C while we treated him like some freeloader?" Rourke exhaled. "Yes, exactly like that." Back on the terminal floor, Jalen's phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't Rachel. Unknown number, label, private line, Altus exec net. He answered quietly. "Jalen Price." There was a pause. Then, "Mr. Price, this is Mitchell Sloan, Senior VP at Altus." Jalen didn't respond. Sloan cleared his throat. "I'd like to personally apologize for the way our staff treated you. This is not who we are as an airline." Jalen cut him off calmly. "You ever heard of an audit trail, Mr. Sloan?" "Excuse me?" "It's the part of the system I wrote. The one that logs every override, every bias trigger, every manipulated reassignment based on non-standard filters." A pause. "Do you know how many of those filters matched my boarding record this morning?" Sloan didn't answer. Jalen's voice remained cool. Seven red flags. 4 related to name mismatch. 2 for loyalty anomaly. 1 tagged as non-tier presentation mismatch. All generated within 90 seconds of me walking up to the counter. Silence. "You don't need to apologize," Jalen said. "You need to explain that to the FAA." And he hung up. Upstairs, Sloan stared at his phone, then turned to the assistant waiting in the doorway. "Get legal," he snapped. "Now. And pull every flagged record from the last 6 months. I want every black and brown passenger who's had a loyalty mismatch." "Sir," the assistant whispered, "we already have reporters asking for that data." Sloan sat down hard. This was spiraling fast. Jalen headed toward the escalators, phone in hand. Another message from Rachel. "DO just confirmed. They're scheduling a joint press hearing with the FAA. They want you to testify. We're going public." Across the airport, Sophie Nguyen sat on a bench, still editing her video reel. She added one last voiceover clip. "He didn't yell, he didn't threaten, he documented, and the system did the rest." She hit upload. 30 seconds later, she received a DM from NBC News. They wanted the exclusive. At 10:41 a.m., the loyalty ethics mandate hit the inbox of every major airline CEO in North America. Attached was a warning. Comply within 72 hours or be flagged as non-ethical carrier. Result: suspension of interline loyalty partnerships. Immediate loss of federal funding eligibility. And the signature? Jalen A. Price, CEO, MilesTrust author, LCI Infrastructure and Ethics Core. In a private office on Wall Street, an investment analyst stared at the alert. "Did we just lose 18% value in 2 hours?" he asked. The reply came sharp. "Yes, because one man on one plane got disrespected by someone who didn't know who he was." "No," the analyst muttered. They knew exactly who he was. Jalen stepped outside the airport, Denver sunlight cutting through the clouds. No entourage, no camera crew, just one man with a laptop bag and his thoughts. His phone buzzed again. "Rachel, the media wants to know why you did it, why you shut it all down. What do you want me to say?" He thought for a second, then replied, "Tell them, I was never trying to be dramatic. I was just proving the system works. If you finally listen to the ones it's ignored." The glass doors of the Federal Aviation Compliance Office in D.C. slid open with a soft hiss. Inside, a quiet tension buzzed in the air. Not frantic, but surgical, controlled. Everyone was waiting for one man. And when Jalen Price stepped into the room, there was no fanfare. No reporters shouting questions, no assistants fumbling behind him, no entourage in matching suits. Just Jalen, black turtleneck, quiet gaze, calm like gravity. A woman in a navy pantsuit stood. "Mr. Price, thank you for coming." She extended her hand. Deputy Secretary Linda Reyes, head of the FAA's Compliance Reform Division. Jalen shook it. "No cameras?" he asked quietly. She smiled faintly. "That comes later. For now, just facts." In the next room, a circle of senior officials, policy leads, and legal advisors waited around a long oval table. 3 placards had been removed, replaced with one simple label: LCI Incident, Flight 728, Altus Air. A man near the front, salt and pepper hair, leaned toward Reyes and whispered, "Is that really him?" Reyes nodded. "Yes, he built the whole thing, from scratch." Jalen sat at the center of the table. No notes, no laptop, just him. Reyes leaned in. "We've reviewed the audit trail, the loyalty reassignment, the filter tags. All of it matches the exact bias pattern we've been trying to flag since 2021. Jalen nodded once. "I wrote the alerting logic. Never thought it would be used on me." A silence fell over the room. One of the legal advisors spoke next. "We want to expand the loyalty ethics mandate into federal code." Jalen didn't react. The advisor continued. "Voluntary compliance isn't enough. If we want to end discriminatory profiling, this has to become law." Another voice added, "But we can't do that without you." Jalen finally looked up. Not angry, not triumphant, just steady. Back in Denver, Sandra sat in a darkened HR room, 2 chairs away from her union rep. She was pale. The video of her tearing the ticket had gone viral. The top comment now had 670,000 likes. She tore paper. He tore down a system. The Altus Air HR director didn't yell. She just slid a paper across the table. "Administrative leave, pending federal investigation." Sandra swallowed hard. Do you know who he really is?" The HR director didn't blink. "He's the reason our airline had a loyalty program in the first place." Meanwhile, in the Altus boardroom in New York, the atmosphere had changed. Radically. CEO Brad Ellison stood by the window, arms crossed, listening to the latest compliance report. "We've lost all partner redemptions through MilesTrust," his CCO said flatly. "That's $600 million in projected Q3 revenue," another exec added. "The DOT just scheduled a Senate hearing on discriminatory tech in aviation. Guess who they invited as lead expert?" Ellison turned slowly. "Jalen Price." The room fell silent. No one needed to ask what that meant. Back in DC, Reyes handed Jalen a folder. Inside was a preliminary draft titled Loyalty Ethics Enforcement Charter, LEEC, to be proposed as federal aviation regulation under Title 49. She looked at him. "If you're willing, we want you to co-author it, officially." Jalen tapped the folder once, then said quietly, "I'm not here to make it personal. This isn't about revenge." Reyes replied, "Exactly why we need you." Later that evening, as the city lit up behind the Capitol dome, Jalen stood outside the FAA building alone. Rachel called. "Guess what?" she said. 4 major airlines just signed pre-compliance letters. One of them was Altus. He raised his eyebrows slightly. "They're scared," she added. "This thing's moving fast." "I know," he said, "and it should." He looked up at the sky. A plane cut across the dusk above. So many people get on those planes, just hoping to be seen. Rachel was quiet. Jalen continued, "I don't want applause. I just want to make sure no one else gets erased in Seat 1A ever again." Across the country, networks lit up with headlines. "The man who froze loyalty. Jalen Price testifies on aviation bias." 3.1b. Loyalty meltdown triggers federal ethics overhaul. From Seat 17C to Capitol Hill, how quiet power reshaped the skies. The public started calling it the Seat 1A Reckoning. At 9:04 p.m., Sophie Nguyen uploaded a new clip. In it, she stood in front of the Capitol steps, holding up the printed draft of the Loyalty Ethics Enforcement Charter. "This," she said, "started because someone decided a black man didn't look like a diamond elite." She held up her phone next. "And this is the man who rewrote what that means." Jalen didn't watch the clips. He was on a red-eye back to San Francisco. Window seat, no fanfare. When the flight attendant came by, she paused for a second. "Mr. Price, thank you." He gave her a small nod. "No one got fired for serving me well," he said gently. "Don't let anyone make you feel small for doing the right thing." She smiled. "That's what we're supposed to do, right?" Jalen turned back to the window. The plane lifted into the night, and with it, so did something else, a new standard. The Senate hearing room was unusually full, not with reporters or protesters, but with faces that didn't usually show up in DC meetings. Airport staff, frequent flyers, civil rights lawyers, flight attendants in uniform, veterans, black grandmothers who flew twice a year and still got randomly selected every time. And at the center of it all, in front of a polished mahogany table, sat Jalen Price. Behind him, on the projection screen, was the title that now carried real weight: the Loyalty Ethics Mandate, presented by MilesTrust. The chairman tapped the mic. "This hearing is now in session. Our purpose is to review the discriminatory use of AI and loyalty data within commercial aviation, and to hear from the individual responsible for initiating the recent industry-wide compliance freeze." He looked up. "Mr. Price, you have the floor." Jalen stood slowly. He didn't wear a suit, just a clean black sweater, dress pants, and presence. Then he began. "When I built the Loyalty Compliance Index, I wanted to make flying more fair. I thought algorithms would solve what humans struggled with: bias, ego, prejudice." He paused. "I was wrong." Across the room, a senator from Georgia leaned forward. "You're saying the system you built turned against people like you?" Jalen nodded. "No, I'm saying it was used exactly the way it was designed, by people who still believed they could profile quietly." Gasps echoed. Jalen continued. "This isn't about one airline. It's about a pattern, a predictable sequence." He tapped the paper in front of him. "We analyzed 3.4 million passenger records over 18 months. The result? Black and brown passengers were 2.7 times more likely to be flagged as loyalty mismatches, despite having valid premium status." He paused again. "And yet, the system called it an error." In the back, Sandra sat in silence, hidden in the last row. She wasn't there to speak. She was there to listen, and it hurt. Jalen scrolled his tablet and brought up the next slide. "This is me," he said, projecting a clip of the incident. The room watched. Sandra tearing the ticket, the look in her eyes, the tight smile that always meant, "You don't belong here." Then the screen split. Side by side, seat 1A, seat 17C, same passenger. Two very different treatments. Sophie Nguyen stood near the press pen, live streaming the entire moment. Her caption read, "He's not just testifying. He's documenting what we all knew, but couldn't prove." Back in Chicago, Rachel and the MilesTrust team monitored the hearing from HQ. Across 4 screens, live data from Airlines was updating in real time. Something unexpected was happening. Voluntary compliance was accelerating. Delta signed. United signed. Sky East signed. Altus Air pending. F, then ding. Altus Air signed. Compliance status, full adoption. Rachel turned to her team. "He's doing it," she whispered. "They're cracking under truth." Jalen closed his testimony with a quiet statement. No system is neutral if it's built on invisible assumptions. Passengers shouldn't have to carry receipts for their humanity. I didn't lock down the loyalty network to punish anyone. I did it because the system refused to listen. He looked at the room. So now, it has to. The chamber was quiet. Then the first clap. Then another. And then the room erupted. Not in noise, but in standing stillness. A standing ovation, not of applause. but of recognition, of relief, of finally being heard. Later that day, outside the Capitol, reporters surrounded him. One asked, "What happens now, Mr. Price?" He looked into the camera. "Now," he said, "we rebuild the sky." That night, headlines ran across the world. Federal mandate to audit loyalty algorithms in all U.S. airlines by year-end. Passengers can now see why they were flagged, thanks to the Jalen Protocol. Black CEO's stand leads to 3.1B loyalty system reform, and trending at number 3 on Twitter. Seat 17, C changed everything. But Jalen wasn't celebrating. He was in a small conference room with 6 airline CEOs and 2 FAA leads. There were no cameras, no handshakes, just work. A new panel, the Ethics Sky Board, was being formed. Its mandate? Enforce transparency in flight upgrades and loyalty scoring. Require independent audits for all passenger scoring systems. Train airline staff in racial and data bias awareness. Publicize all flagging logic used on passengers. And Jalen? He wasn't just a witness anymore. He was chairman. At 11:48 p.m., Sophie posted one last video. She stood alone in front of the Senate steps. "This isn't about being famous," she said. "It's about being visible." And Jalen didn't rise. He made the floor rise beneath us. Jalen walked out of the FAA building under the stars, shoulders loose. He pulled out his phone. Text from his dad. "Your mother would have been proud." He smiled softly, then opened his MilesTrust app and looked at the latest update. Discrimination flag, transparency enabled. Live underneath was a new line. Passenger ID, Jalen Price. Status, verified. No anomalies. By the time Jalen landed back in San Francisco the next morning, the storm had already started brewing. Not outside. Skies were clear. Inside the industry, a Category 5. News had broken overnight that the FAA was drafting a federal regulation based on the loyalty ethics mandate, now dubbed the Jalen Protocol. Every major airline CEO woke up to the same headline: 3.1B system freeze sparks, aviation overhaul. At the Conrad Hotel in D.C., a closed-door meeting had turned into a blame game. Executives from 4 top airlines sat tense around a conference table, skimming through leaked FAA memos. "This is outrageous," one barked. "He's turned our entire loyalty infrastructure into a federal tool," another added. "Passengers shouldn't get to question our upgrade decisions. That's proprietary." A young VP in a sharp navy suit raised her eyebrow. "Well, now it's public, and now you're accountable." Silence. They hated it. But there was nothing they could do, because passengers, from college students to retirees, were watching now, and they weren't going back to being silent. Outside the MilesTrust headquarters, a wave of reporters was waiting. "Mr. Price, do you have a response to the airline consortium's challenge against your ethics protocol?" Jalen didn't flinch. "I expected resistance," he said calmly. "Systems that profit from silence never welcome transparency." Inside, Rachel handed him a thick folder and 2 black coffees. "You've got a briefing at 10, a call with the Secretary of Transportation at noon, and, the NAACP wants to propose integrating the protocol into all future civil rights litigation." Jalen blinked, lips twitching. "I thought this was just about seat 1A. Rachel laughed. "Legacy doesn't ask for permission." Over at Altus headquarters, Brad Ellison's office looked like a war room. His legal counsel had just finished reviewing the projected costs of complying with the new federal protocol. $142 million, he growled. "Just for system updates and retraining?" The GC answered coolly. "It's cheaper than your stock tanking again." Ellison glared, then exhaled through clenched teeth. "Fine. Greenlight the updates, but make sure the press thinks it was our initiative, not his." Back at MilesTrust, Jalen sat down in the cafe across from a familiar face, one he hadn't expected to see. Sandra. No uniform, No flight badge, just a pale expression and the heaviness of a mistake she couldn't take back. "I'm not here to apologize," she said quietly. "Good," Jalen replied. "I'm not here to accept one." She hesitated. "I came to ask if I could help. I don't want the next passenger to go through what I did to you." Jalen looked at her. "You mean what you did to yourself?" Then he paused. "You can help. Join the ethics board." Her eyes widened. "You trust me with that?" "No," he said plainly. "But I trust growth. I trust what happens when people stop hiding behind policies and start standing in front of them." 2 days later, the FAA convened a national forum. It was the first of its kind, and it was open to the public. Anyone could watch. A man in a wheelchair stood near the mic. His voice trembled. "Will this protocol protect passengers like me, who get moved from first class because they don't look like they paid for it?" Jalen stood. "It's not just for people who look like me. It's for anyone who's ever been told they didn't belong. Without reason, without evidence, without dignity." Across the country, kiosks in major airports updated overnight. A new line appeared at the bottom of every screen. "View Loyalty Decision History. Powered by MilesTrust Ethics Engine." And with that line, something radical happened. Transparency. Passengers could now see why they were upgraded or denied, who overrode their seat, if a flag was triggered, if their profile had been altered, and how to dispute it. But not everyone was celebrating. A few industry-backed media outlets launched their own counter-narratives. Did one man go too far? Loyalty frees sparks, chaos for everyday travelers. CEO with a vendetta? Rachel slammed her laptop shut. They're throwing everything they can. Jalen sipped his coffee, unfazed. Let them. They can attack me all day, but they can't undo the data. And the data didn't lie. 87% of flagged passengers in the past year were Black or Latino. 92% of manual downgrades came from airports with no bias training. After the rollout of the protocol, discriminatory downgrades dropped by 64% in 2 weeks. In JFK, a young Latina woman approached the gate agent with a Diamond Elite card. She braced herself. She'd been downgraded 3 times that year. The agent looked at her name, typed in a few keys, and smiled. "Welcome aboard, Ms. Alvarez. Seat 1A is yours. No reassignments today." She blinked. "You're not going to move me?" He chuckled. "Not anymore." Her smile was small but real. As she walked down the jet bridge, she whispered, "Thank you, Jalen." That night, Jalen received a text from an unfamiliar number. It was a photo. A middle-aged black man seated comfortably in 2A, smiling next to his young daughter. "They tried to move me again. Your system flagged it. I stayed. For the first time in years, I felt protected. Thank you." Jalen read it, sat back, and let himself breathe. A breath he hadn't taken in months. At the Department of Transportation, the secretary made it official. The loyalty ethics mandate will be adopted as a federal standard, effective immediately. The Jalen Protocol is now law. Later that evening, Sophie Nguyen uploaded her final video in the Jalen series. Standing in front of the Capitol steps, she spoke directly to the camera. Jalen didn't rage. He redesigned. He didn't tear down. He patched. He didn't demand power. He gave it back to us. As the clip faded to black, the screen displayed a quote from Jalen's testimony. Passengers shouldn't have to carry receipts for their humanity. For millions of viewers, it wasn't just about seat 1A anymore. It was about every gate, every flight, every quiet moment where someone dared to say, "I belong here too." Jalen Price hadn't meant to become a symbol. He didn't wake up thinking about legacy or protocols or shaking the foundation of an entire industry. He just wanted to sit in his seat, quietly, like everyone else. But now, he was at the center of a storm he couldn't walk away from, even if he wanted to. The next step wasn't about public hearings or applause. It was about permanence. If change was going to last, It had to be written in systems that couldn't be quietly reversed by some executive memo or overnight policy edit. And for that, Jalen needed something more powerful than visibility. He needed law. The Senate Subcommittee on Transportation and Ethics was reconvening for a final vote on the Passenger Accountability Act, a sweeping legislative package built on the principles of the Jalen Protocol. If passed, it would enforce algorithmic transparency and prohibit discriminatory flagging across all federally regulated carriers. It would also, for the first time, give passengers the legal right to challenge loyalty and upgrade decisions with hard data. The hearing room was packed, but this time, Jalen wasn't testifying. He was sitting quietly in the second row, next to Rachel and Sophie. The bill was out of his hands now. Across the aisle, lobbyists whispered behind folded folders, trying to calculate whether they had the votes to block it. Senator Monroe, a wiry man with a worn-out voice and sharp eyes, cleared his throat. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "this isn't about one man's story. This is about what happens when an entire population gets silently profiled in an industry that prides itself on efficiency over equity." He gestured toward Jalen without saying his name. When that man had his ticket torn, it wasn't a glitch. It was a mirror, and what we saw in it, we didn't like. Jalen didn't move. He didn't need to. The vote passed, 9-2, and just like that, the Passenger Accountability Act was headed to the floor of Congress. When they exited the chamber, reporters swarmed. Rachel turned toward the cameras. "This isn't a win for one person," she said. "It's a win for every traveler who's ever been treated like they didn't matter." One reporter shouted, "Mr. Price, how does it feel to bring down an entire industry's wall of silence?" Jalen finally spoke. "I didn't bring it down," he said. "I just showed people how to walk around it." The next day, MilesTrust pushed a quiet update to its app. A new feature, Flag History by Airport. Now users could see not just how they were scored, but where and by whom. The rollout caused a ripple effect no one fully anticipated. Within 48 hours, passengers started sharing patterns online. A man in Chicago noticed his upgrades were denied every time he passed through Denver. A woman in Atlanta found she had been flagged as probability mismatch 9 times in Phoenix, despite flying with the same ID card and booking method. The pattern was ugly and undeniable. Newsrooms picked it up within hours. Passengers expose racial profiling algorithms across U.S. airports. FAA opens national review after Miles. Trust data goes public. Do you know what your loyalty status really means? The backlash wasn't quiet this time. Airlines scrambled to do damage control, but passengers were no longer waiting for statements. They had receipts, and receipts don't lie. By Friday, 3 major airlines voluntarily suspended their auto-flagging systems. Altus, once the loudest opponent, issued a public apology. "We now understand that systemic bias cannot be corrected in silence," the statement read. "We thank Mr. Price and MilesTrust for holding us accountable." Jalen didn't retweet it. He just forwarded it to his father, who replied with a simple thumbs-up emoji and a heart. That weekend, Jalen took a rare break. He drove up to Mendocino, checked into a quiet lodge, and left his phone on airplane mode. He hiked, read, slept. For the first time in months, he wasn't refreshing data dashboards or reading legal briefs. He was just breathing. But when he returned Monday morning, something was waiting. A letter. Real paper. No logo. No return address. Just his name, written in pen. He opened it. Inside was a note, written in tight, slanted handwriting. "I was 14 the first time I got told I didn't belong in business class. I didn't fight it. I just swallowed it. When you spoke up, you didn't just change policy. You gave me back something I didn't know I'd lost. Dignity. Thank you. Seat 4B. He stared at the signature. There wasn't one. Just that simple line. Seat 4B. Jalen folded the letter slowly, hands trembling. That afternoon, the FAA requested a private meeting with him. The agency had just completed a 3-week audit of the top 10 domestic airlines, comparing pre- and post-implementation metrics from the MilesTrust platform. What they found was staggering. 92% reduction in loyalty-based downgrades with no explanation, 64% drop in racial bias flags within scoring systems, 70% increase in successful passenger appeals using transparency tools, a 41% increase in passenger trust rating across all 5 major booking platforms. They didn't just want to thank him. They wanted to integrate the MilesTrust system directly into FAA oversight for the next fiscal year. Permanent compliance, not a patch, a core. Jalen shook their hands. No cameras, no microphones, just a quiet commitment to keep going. That night, Sophie posted a new video, not a reel, not a viral hit, just her, sitting on her couch, laptop open. "I've covered Jalen's journey since the beginning," she said. "But I realized something today. It wasn't about Jalen. It was about a system that finally had to answer the question, why do you treat us differently?" And the answer wasn't good enough anymore. A week later, Congress officially passed the Passenger Accountability Act with bipartisan support. Every airline operating in U.S. airspace would now be required to submit their upgrade, flagging, and seat reassignment algorithms for federal review. Any system with unexplainable bias patterns would be grounded until corrected. Jalen stood beside the Secretary of Transportation during the signing ceremony, but he said nothing. He didn't need to. His work had already spoken. Later, in the elevator down from the Capitol, Rachel nudged him. "You know we're just getting started, right?" He smiled. "Yeah, but this time, we're flying first class." 6 months later, it started quietly. 1 airline, then 2, then 5. Suddenly, dozens of airlines began shifting their loyalty tech to third-party vendors not yet subject to the Passenger Accountability Act. Loopholes, delays, fine print. They were trying to wait it out. Jalen knew this wasn't over. He'd changed the law, yes, but now came the harder part, enforcing it. Back in the MilesTrust offices, Rachel stormed into his conference room holding a tablet. 3 major airlines just partnered with a Singapore-based vendor, she said. They're claiming the data's processed offshore, so it's outside FAA reach. Jalen didn't blink. "Get me the Commerce Department and the DOJ's Antitrust Division." He stood. "If they want to play jurisdiction games, let's play chess." Over the next 2 weeks, he assembled a coalition, something bigger than MilesTrust, bigger than aviation. They called it the Passenger Equity Consortium, a legal, tech, and policy alliance backed by civil rights groups, labor unions, consumer watchdogs, and a surprise latecomer, the U.S. Treasury's Financial Ethics Oversight Panel. Together, they drafted a new framework, the Loyalty Integrity Treaty, a multi-industry ethics agreement tethering airline loyalty programs to interbank point systems and federal valuation standards. And here's the twist. Jalen already controlled the software that tracked $3.1 billion of those point-to-dollar values through Visa Air Alliance. It wasn't just about airline perks anymore. Now it touched banks, credit networks, stock valuations, insurance-backed risk models. If the airlines didn't comply, every point they issued would be treated as a non-fungible, non-compliant asset. Untrusted by banks, unrecognized by federal regulators. In plain English, useless. Rachel looked at him one evening across the dimly lit office. "Are we really doing this?" she asked. Jalen gave a small nod. "They made this a war over invisible status. I'm just showing them the receipts." When the airlines pushed back, Jalen didn't threaten them. He just triggered the System Integrity Lockdown 2.0. MilesTrust froze all point redemptions across 6 major airlines for 72 hours. Passengers flooded social media. "Just got told my 120,000 miles are pending review? What the hell? Anyone else get downgraded after 15 years as a Platinum Elite? What's going on with MilesTrust?" Then Sophie dropped the video, a 6-minute expose. It opened with Jalen sitting quietly in an empty terminal. He looked directly at the camera. "They gave us points instead of power," he said. "Now we're giving the power back." The video went viral in 2 hours. Public pressure exploded. Within 24 hours, the Treasury and Department of Transportation issued joint statements endorsing the Loyalty Integrity Treaty. 3 airline CEOs resigned. 2 banks paused their loyalty partnerships. And 1 week later, every airline that had previously resisted quietly signed. At the signing event, Jalen didn't speak. He handed the pen to a teenage girl named Ayana, a passenger who'd once been told by a gate agent she was probably lost because she had a first-class ticket. She signed with a smile. No media circus, just justice. When it was done, Jalen walked out into the rain. Rachel jogged up beside him, grinning. "You just rewrote the playbook for every passenger in America." Jalen looked up at the sky. "I didn't rewrite it," he said. "I just made sure we all get to read it this time." 3 months after the Loyalty Integrity Treaty was signed, the world didn't look the same. The change wasn't flashy. It was quiet, systemic. Airports no longer felt like judgment zones for certain passengers. Lounge agents double-checked before flagging someone ineligible. Gate attendants were trained on dignity-first protocols. But the real shift? It was digital. The MilesTrust platform, now integrated into FAA oversight, had become the heartbeat of ethical flight operations. Every loyalty transaction, every upgrade, every auto flag now required transparent justification. And the audits? Brutal, public, effective. Rachel sat in a glass conference room at MilesTrust HQ, flipping through a printout of the latest compliance dashboard. She smiled. "Only 4 flags without full rationale across 6 airlines this week," she said. "That's down from 9-12 a month ago." Jalen glanced over but didn't respond. He was staring at the wall, specifically the framed boarding pass, seat 1A. The one Sandra tore in half. It wasn't about revenge, not anymore. It was about memory and reminders. Because even after all the legislation, press, and signatures, the truth remained. The fight wasn't over. Sophie entered the room with a fresh mug of coffee and a flash drive. "You might want to see this," she said, plugging it into the conference monitor. A video loaded. Security footage from a small airport in Nevada. A black woman, mid-50s, well-dressed, stood at a check-in counter, calm, polite, smiling. The agent across from her rolled his eyes, whispered something to a colleague, then told her, flatly, that the flight was full and her seat had been reassigned. No explanation. Sophie paused the video. "She's a school principal from Oakland," she said. "Her name's Denise Randall. The ticket was valid. The seat was hers." Jalen leaned back. "So it's still happening?" Sophie nodded. "Less often, but it's not gone." Rachel looked over. "What do you want to do?" Jalen didn't answer right away. Then he stood and walked to the glass wall. Beyond it, dozens of engineers tapped away at their terminals, updating, monitoring, fine-tuning the algorithm that now governed over 120 million travelers. He turned. "We're not a watchdog," he said. "We're a mirror. If the system wants to pretend it's clean, we show them every speck of dirt." Sophie tilted her head. "You want to go public with this?" "No," Jalen said. "I want her to." The next day, Sophie reached out to Denise, and within 72 hours, Denise Randall stood on a stage in front of 2,000 aviation professionals at the Global Passenger Ethics Conference in Washington, D.C. She didn't scream. She didn't accuse. She told the truth. "I'm not famous," she said. "I don't run a tech firm. I don't have a legal team on speed dial. But I've taught 5th grade for 29 years. And last week, I taught the most important lesson of my life from behind a check-in counter." Her voice didn't shake. "My dignity is not a variable. And if your system sees it as one, then your system is broken." She walked off stage to a standing ovation. And in the crowd, quietly clapping near the back, was Jalen. That night, he got a call from the White House. the Secretary of Transportation wanted to nominate him to lead a new federal task force, the Passenger Justice Initiative, a joint effort between DOT, FAA, and the Department of Justice, aimed at making ethical air travel a non-negotiable standard, not a PR goal. He didn't say yes, not yet. Instead, he walked out onto the rooftop of the MilesTrust building. The city buzzed below. Planes blinked in the night sky, taking off, landing, circling. Rachel joined him a few minutes later. "You okay?" He nodded. "But I keep thinking about one thing," he said. "What if I hadn't gotten on that flight? What if I just walked away quietly when she tore my ticket?" Rachel shrugged. "Someone else would have stood up. Eventually." Jalen shook his head. "No, not like this." He looked down at the streets, so full of life, noise, movement. "We don't change the world all at once," he said. "We do it in moments, small ones, quiet ones. But if we honor them, they echo." Rachel stepped beside him. "You ready for what's next?" Jalen smiled. "I was born ready. I just didn't know it until they told me I didn't belong." 6 months later, a small bronze plaque was installed in Terminal B at JFK. Right above Gate 12, the inscription was simple, in honor of every passenger who was ever told they didn't belong and chose to stay anyway. This gate marks the first flight grounded in protest that reshaped the future of airline ethics. It didn't mention Jalen's name. He requested it that way, because by then, it was bigger than him. Much bigger. The Loyalty Integrity Treaty had now been adopted by 42 countries across 5 continents. Aviation schools were integrating the Jalen Protocol into their training curriculum. And every airport that wanted access to the Visa Air Alliance loyalty valuation platform had to agree to the Passenger Equity Certification Program, or risk being blacklisted from the 3.1B interbank system that Jalen's platform quietly governed. But for Jalen, the real legacy wasn't in the numbers. It was in the people. At a quiet lounge in Chicago O'Hare, a teenage black boy named Miles sat across from his grandmother, showing her how to check her upgrade status on her phone. "It says you got it," he grinned. She looked surprised. "They never upgrade me." Miles shrugged. "They do now." In Atlanta, a Muslim woman wearing a hijab was pulled aside for a random check. Before the agent could speak, the supervisor appeared behind him. "Nope," she said. "Passengers already cleared. Equity flag verified. Let her board." In Boston, a deaf passenger received a real-time text alert when her gate was reassigned, automatically translated through the new accessibility algorithm tied into the MilesTrust platform. All of it quiet, all of it real.